Hi, this is International Master John Watson, and I'm reporting for ICC on round 7 of the Tata Steel Chess Tournament in Wijk aan Zee, Holland, or Netherlands, one of the very few remaining incredibly traditional international tournaments with a storied history, which includes really every grandmaster, every world champion over the last probably 60 years or so, if not more. And it has been called the Wimbledon of chess. So this is a magnificent tournament, and I hope you've been following it so far. At the top of the standings entering this round, in the Masters section, there are two sections, the Masters section and the Challenger section. Entering this round, Wesley So had a half-point lead over Magnus Carlsen and Pavel Elyanov. He had 4.5 points, followed by 4 points for those two, then followed by Levon Aronian, Anish Giri, and Y Yi at 3.5 points. And the actual order of the leaders actually didn't change, oddly enough, after some very exciting, interesting things happening. This round, let me just tell you about some results first before we get to any games. Karyakin won a big game. Sergei Karyakin won a big game against Levon Aronian, and we're going to look at that. Wesley So drew Elyanov, and that actually was very interesting because Elyanov had a significant advantage at one point, but So played very, very creatively after not playing the beginning of the game very well. Adibon beat Vocacek, and that was a crazy game because it looks like Vocacek was winning. Well, in fact, he was winning. And he pretty much dominated the game, and at the end it got incredibly tricky, and they were in time trouble, and all of a sudden Adibon pulled out the game. And very exciting players. It's really nice to have these players in the tournament because they're producing more interesting chess, maybe than the guys on the top. Then there was a draw between Andriakin and Hari Krishna. Neither side ever had much of an advantage there. Yi or Yi, depending how you say it, beat Luc van Vele in a very interesting game. He just absolutely crushed him in the opening, just slaughtered him, and was just winning easily. And then really threw it away and had to win an endgame. And luckily, I think the endgame was winning, but it was very close. So that was a very strange game. But poor Luc van Vele lost again. But Yi now has entered into a tie for second place, by the way. And Nepomniachtchi drew Richard Rapport, and then the game that we're going to look at first was the longest game of the round by far, and with all kinds of strange things happening, Magnus Carlsen versus Anish Giri. So let me just go to the standings really fast. The new standings are first place for Wesley So with 5 points. Second place is a tie between Carlsen and Elyanov and Yi now. So there's a new entrant in the second place slot with 4.5 points. And then tied for fourth and fifth, I guess it would be, is our Aronian, Hari Krishna, Andriakin, and Adibon. I think that's right. I think I've got that. Let me see if that's true. No, I'm sorry. Anish Giri has 4. So Karyakin, my mistake. Karyakin, and I'm just reading off the cross table here and adding. So Giri and Karyakin have 4 points now. So they're tied for 4th through 5th, and then the other players trail. So basically, once again, Wesley So is winning the tournament by half point. Carlsen, Elyanov, and Yi are tied for second. Okay, and let me quickly talk also about the challengers before we get to the games, just to give the rest of the news. Let me just say what the new standings are in the challengers. I could talk about, I guess, what happened today in the games, but let me see. Is that worth doing? Yeah, maybe that's worth doing. Ilya Smirin beat Benjamin Bach in a big game. That's an important game because it puts Smirin in sole third place now. Martin Reger won his game, so he's tied with Gawain Jones, who also won. Reger beat Gurumshvili, and Gawain Jones beat Von Foreest. So they are now tied for first with 5.5. Smirin is in sole second, actually. Well, he's in third place, I guess, because he's behind those two with 3 points. And then there's a tied for the next slots between Lu Shangli and Jeffrey Zhang. And Jeffrey Zhang won a game which I'm going to show. Okay, so that's all the results. So let me now go to the actual game. So let's take a look at this Carlson Geary game. It's right before you, and it's over 100 moves, so we're going to kind of zip through a lot of the moves. This is a very nondescript opening, typical of these guys these days, just not trying for anything in the opening. I could give you a bunch of notes. There is some theory here, but I don't think it's worth it. By the way, I like to play, okay, just for the record, I do think making a 94 move, maybe after this, for example, just making a 94 move is a good way to equalize positions like this. But because somehow Gary sort of drifted and got the worst game, so we kind of maybe should think about how that happened a little bit. I don't really like the queen there. Now, still fine. Actually, this was a good plan. I don't know about 95 either, because now Gary's okay again, because he's got that little bit of pressure on the dark squares. That's a nice, ambitious move, and so is that. In fact, it sort of made him retreat. Now, I think Black objectively should just go back again and dare White to play 95 again, because White has no particularly good plan here. That queen's just influential enough to make up for the fact that White has a little space advantage. He didn't play that. He played captures, and pretty soon, and then he gave up the bishops. And now it's bishop versus knight, and I don't know if this is what you want to do against Carlsen. I mean, it'd be hopeless for me to play a position like this. And here's this is very instructive. This idea of playing a4, a5 often leads to a bigger endgame advantage than you would think. So White has two advantages here. One is that Black can't prevent a4, a5 without creating a big weakness on b6 by playing a5, which might not be that bad a move, by the way. And the other is bishop versus knight with pawns on both sides of the board. That's an advantage, and so White is definitely better here. Has a definite advantage, not probably enough to win against good play. That turns out to have been a big mistake. Just for the record, the way to play this is this move knight b8. That was the way to play, because then even though this pawn is weak, so is the d pawn on an open file, and you get enough counterplay no matter what. Let me see if I can show you that. For example, this move. Is that right? See if I have the right position here. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have played it before a5. My fault. So right here would have been a good place to play this. Then a5. Yeah, I wonder what was going on there. Okay. And then you just get this counterattack going here, fast enough that you're able to equalize. Because there's a little trick here. Knight e4 is a very strong move with a triple fork threat. And it just turns out, however White tries to defend against that, he can't win the b pawn because there's enough counter pressure in the center. So that would have probably just about equalized, and that was the best way to play. But after rook c7, now it's too late for knight b8. Sorry about that. I mean, you could still try it, but you're going to lose some material. Now, I think pawn takes was better, as it turns out. White can kind of keep the pressure up. That knight's not well placed, and White's better. But this move turned out to be pretty bad, because this is now a passed pawn, and that's still a weak pawn. So he's sort of the worst of both worlds. So Carlsen now has what might be very close to a winning advantage. This is I'm just going to show you the moves here. That finally he pushes his passed pawn. Now that gives up an outpost here, but it was sort of necessary to activate this bishop and to just to make progress. Okay. So Black's defending well, but White had now that he needs to do that to defend the d pawn so he can have his other pieces free. And Black simplifies. These are probably best moves. Computer approves of these moves. I like f6 a lot because it gets a little bit of space. Lets the king come up. But we still have bishop versus knight. That move turns out probably to be just a little too. It's nice to open up the position and simplify, but in this case, it creates too big a weakness. He should have just tried to sit on it. White's definitely better. Maybe not. Maybe winning was a little bit exaggerated. It could be winning. Certainly better. But now I think now he's really in trouble. c6, good move. This pawn is simply too weak now. And Carlsen has such incredible technique. These are good moves, by the way, from both sides. But now this pawn's pretty much falling. Bishop goes there. And now he has to watch out for that. Now right away there's this knight takes move. So Black makes a clever move, a good move, because if White takes now, he runs into this knight takes move. And then after it takes, he can really play it either way. He can even go here. Or he could play just takes. Because this pin doesn't win the game. Just king moves up, and it just turns out this is almost for sure a draw. White can probably get to 2 against 1, but that's not enough. It's too simplified position. So that was very clever of Anish, but Carlsen just keeps the pressure on by bringing the king up. And now he starts harassing. Yeah, now look at the pressure on that pawn, and he can't take that because he just gets pinned up. So let's take a look at where this is. I don't know where to give you all the details, but there's never a point where black can take that pawn. A very nice move, h4. h5 looks way committal, but actually black's running out of moves. Just turns out he's running out of moves. In a move like this, all of a sudden there's a check, and that forces another check. Guess what? This pawn's falling. I mean, it's that simple. And if he plays here, trying to attack this, just go here, threatening this. He can pick up this pawn later if he needs to, with a move like this. Black's just running out of space. It's typical Carlsen squeeze, and there's nothing much to do about it. So he tries this h5 move, but of course now that's going to be lost at some point. And there's going to be 2 passed pawns on the king's side. So this is getting to the point where you kind of feel it's one. Now that a6 is just because he doesn't have any moves left, basically. It gives up the pawn, but if you look at this carefully, you'll see there's really no other way to play. So Carlsen has just played a perfect game, basically. And Geary has not defended badly at all. It's just there's nothing to do. So now he's a pawn up. And and he gives up that pawn because it turns out that he's winning. There's just no way to play this. If you go here, then white plays check. King has to come back here if he's not going to be mated. But then the problem is, let me just see, what would be the move here? Rook d6 would win material, wouldn't it? Because you can't put something on d7. So so you just can't take that pawn. You have to play rook e6 here. Carlsen has this all worked out. And now this pawn's going to fall with passed pawns, and also all these pieces are starting to hang now for black. I mean, everything's sort of loose. This is the one desperate idea, and it's a good idea because otherwise the h pawn just falls, and you might as well just give up. King's very exposed too. So he plays this really kind of amazing idea, which is simply to try to queen the pawn in return for losing some material. But unfortunately, it's just there's nowhere for the king to go. Let me see if I can describe where else he might have tried to go here. If he plays king here, this check is just too good. Because if the king goes here, you just take it, and you put the rook back, and now this one's falling. And it's just two. That's not only bishop versus knight, but it's 2 passed pawns versus none. So because you pick up that pawn, so that loses. And where else could he even try to go here? He can try to go here. But now you just get too much for the queen. It looks like the pawn's going to queen, but the problem is it's very simple to win with, I think, check. Can't go that way, so he has to go this way. And then I think the easiest way to win here, it turns out, is simply check. I'm there, and after the queen goes here, you just take that, and then this one falls. And all black has is 1 check, and then you'll see he has 2 rooks and a bishop against the king, and that's plus 2 extra pawns, so that's an easy win. Okay, so that's why he goes straight back, which is the best move. And Geary is no slouch here, and but what he missed, or what both sides possibly missed, was this beautiful move that Carlsen makes, and that basically finishes the game. But Carlsen doesn't see why. Check, and now the most amazing thing that's happened in the tournament happens. At this point, white plays this move. Well, check is correct, driving the king over. And now white plays this move. And this is an elementary checkmate. And Carlsen had plenty of time. I think he had something like 40 minutes left here. And somehow he just amazingly missed this incredibly simple check. And black could play back, but then he's a whole rook behind, plus 2 pawns and just signs. And so he has to play here, and then white simply plays check, and the king has to come up, and white plays mate. So it's very odd that somehow he missed this. And notice that this is the same thing. Simple checkmate. Probably the easiest checkmate Carlsen's ever missed in his life with this much time. left, and just a total hallucination. And a matter of fact, it changes the result of the game because as the movie plays, turns out not to be quite good enough um, because of. Well, let's just show you this. He wins a ton of material, but at this point, that's the only move, by the way. But at this point, he's kind of stuck because if he plays this move, he's losing the rook in the corner. And that's, in fact, you'll see that. The point is, what else can he do here? There's no other way to try and pursue the attack here. So what the movie missed, it turned out, was right at this point. He had this sort of amazing move here, which still wins, but that's a computer move. I mean, I wouldn't have found that move. It's just crazy. Like, that's not the sort of thing you do in a real game, maybe when you're getting a little lower on time, because by now he's been doing a lot of calculating. Because it leaves the rook hanging, this rook hanging. You don't like to leave three loose pieces when your king's exposed to checks with the queen. But it turns out this wins because there's no way to actually get the checks to work, and white's pieces are coordinating brilliantly, and you can win the game now. After what he played, and you can't blame him for not playing that. That's just not a human move. But it turns out that after he plays that move, black is actually okay, good enough to draw here. Because if white takes this, you have check, and there really isn't much choice. There isn't that much else for white to do, as it turns out. So he does have to end up dropping that piece. Okay, so now we have a position which is 2 pawns and a rook and a bishop. It should have some winning chances, but it's probably theoretically drawn. And so the players at this point just go on forever. They play. Now there's a 50 move rule if you don't capture a piece or move a pawn. And they flirt with that. Really, white finds that he simply can't make progress. He just tries move after move after move. I'm going to just whip through all these moves because we do want to get to other things. And if these guys can't find a win, or if Carlsen can't find a win, there probably isn't one. Now, notice he hasn't moved a pawn now. It's turning into about 40 moves now. It's heading towards 50. So now, amazingly, he gets all the way down to where I think there's only a couple moves left, and he moves a pawn. So the rule is that you can't go 50 moves without making a capture or moving a pawn. Well, he just moved a pawn with about, I don't know, 2 more moves or something to go until the 50 move rule would have taken effect. So now they've got 50 more moves to play around with. But fortunately, you'll see what happens. Fortunately, okay, he really commits this time to making a move, but that move really doesn't do much because a king could even get here at some point and block the pawn. So that now it really is a draw in a more straightforward way. And that's a very nice move because it allows the win to the queen. But now, for those of you who don't know it, this is what's called the wrong color rook pawn. Because when you have a bishop and a rook pawn, this color has to be of the same color as the bishop in order for the position to be winning, as long as the king can get back, and the king can get back. So they play this out. You'll see what happens. The king just hides in the corner. This is an effortless draw because you don't even have any way to go wrong, and that's a stalemate. So, amazing game. The fact that Carlos missed an easy mate is just staggering. But the rest of it's certainly understandable. He couldn't win the rest of the ending there. Okay, so then let's move on to another game. We've got two more games to look at. Okay, so here we have Sergei Karyakin versus Levronian. Levronian was in second place coming into this round, but fell into trouble in this game. Okay, now I think Karyakin's both sides are getting extremely used to double e-pawn with bishop c4. This is the latest thing. People are just playing this like crazy. Now, he gave up that pawn, but I think there's actually, I'm not absolutely sure, but I believe this move, bishop takes f2 check, works here because of queen f6 check, right? So you can't take the pawn yet. And now the pawn gets protected. Okay, same tactic applies, and now finally he protects it. But it does allow this move, d4. And it turns out there's this c4 move that would have won the game here early on. Let me see, was it here? I think it was already here. I think it was at this point where c4 is a very strong move. No, last move? Wait a minute, sorry. My apologies. C4 now was a very strong move because there's a trick. Because after the knight comes here, you play here, and it's with check that you're threatening that. And so you're winning a piece here. Isn't that amazing? So there was a forced win here that was missed. It's such an unnatural tactic that that both sides missed it. See, here's the move. So that's the strange thing about this game, but it's also kind of fun. It's a very unique tactic. I've never seen it before. I don't think, obviously they probably hadn't seen it before either. See, the point is bishop takes is threatened, but after takes you play check, and then this bishop is hanging. So that was the first interesting thing about this game. The first sort of amazing thing about this game is that white didn't play, black missed that idea, and white didn't play it. Okay, so instead white played the most natural move on the board. This is what almost any master or master or anybody would do automatically because the pawn is pinned. So you're getting this pawn here is pinned because the bishop's behind it. So the move d4 is both natural and good. It just happens that it's tactically bad. So okay, so he unpins this pawn, but he's going to have trouble hanging on to it. Okay, so what happens now? Okay, he takes that. He has to get rid of that. And then this, and now this guy's hanging here. The problem is if he hadn't taken that first, well, I won't go into too much detail here, but if he had played, let me see, knight takes right away, and then tried to win this pawn, then he's getting killed on the f-file again. Bishop takes f2 check again. And then there's bishop h5 winning the queen. So that wouldn't work. Actually, it's not that easy because there's rook takes d5 at the end, but I won't go. It's just not a good line anyway. Okay, so he takes that first and then isolates that pawn. Now black has two bishops, but this pawn is very weak. So all white has to do is protect that pawn, which he does, and he can try for a little advantage. And he does that. Now he's thinking about getting a knight on e4 in front of the isolated pawn on the outpost square. That's why this is a good game. It's instructive in that sense. Okay, black plays very actively. This is what you do when you have the bishops and you have a weakness, is you try to counterattack and force some weaknesses on white's part. So let me just make a few more moves here. White gets that outpost. Now you would think with an outpost in front of a static pawn that white would just be better. But the thing is, black has this option of taking this off at various points. And that means that maybe he can just equalize after all. So let's just see this. Okay, so now he's thinking about taking that and just changing the pawn structure. And it turns out he can't do it yet, but he could have done it pretty much right now. This is pretty much an equal game. And this actually turned out to be almost the last chance for him to do this. Maybe he had one more chance after this, I'm not sure. But he played here, and all of a sudden, after a couple more moves, okay, one more move, that happened. And after this, all of a sudden, black's distinctly worse because white has an outpost in front of an isolated pawn. And he can just play around for now and eventually target that pawn and try to win it. So this is just a clear advantage for white. So very mysterious why Aronian didn't take bishop takes e4. He just didn't want to draw, apparently, and thought he could hang on anyway with bishop versus knight. Okay, so it's still not desperate, but very soon now, it gets really bad. Already, white has a significant advantage. And that's where things really go wrong. The queen turns out to be really poorly placed there. And now all of a sudden it's kind of stuck. The queen's kind of stuck, and this move b4 is becoming very serious. Because if you can chase the queen away completely, then you're just going to win this pawn. You're just going to move the knight and win that pawn. And there's really no way out of that. So maybe this is already a winning position. That move threatens knight d5. Excellent move, because after c6, the knight comes back again, and now the d6 square is hanging. And the queen still can't get out. It can't get away from it. It needs to be over here somewhere, defending the king side. And b4 is a big move, too, coming up. So this is probably just about a winning game at this point. Also, by the way, Aronian had no time left here. But it's very instructive to see how Karyakin did that. First threatened knight d5, then got this weakness, and now chased the queen away. And so from now on, it's really a matter of sort of technique. Also, Aronian had no time left. But it's a nice game. Just to sort of see how, Karyakin is just a master at putting the pressure on like this. And it's good try, good counter-attacking try. Might as well just at least get that pin. But now the problem is that the queen here, there's a knight f7 sometimes. The pressure on the file is very strong. Another good move. You could just play c5. White can always just play c5. I mean, he does finally and consolidates. He's already a pawn ahead, and he's got this overwhelming knight on the 6th rank. And that's a very nice move because it wins another pawn because of knight here. There's a double threat, a knight here, and knight takes h6. In fact, it wins the exchange. So, because he's got exactly the same problem. It looks like the rook's hanging, but then the problem is you've got just winning a whole piece. Your whole piece ahead plus a pawn. So instead of that, black tries this, but then the problem is this rook's hanging, and another pawn just fell. So the rest is just technique. We'll just finish this up pretty quickly. There are some details here, but they're not particularly interesting. So white won even more material, and now he just queens this pawn, basically. One last trick, trying to play rook takes check. White simply plays there, and black resigns. Because after rook takes check, the king just moves up, and there's nothing to do about this pawn. This pawn's going to queen. So very nice technical game, and a real nice win by Karyakin, and it shows and a very unusual loss by Leveronian, who got just basically positionally outplayed. He really needed to play that bishop takes e4 move, but you almost never see Leveronian get positionally outplayed. He can get tactically outplayed sometimes, but so this is a nice win for Karyakin. You just don't see Aronian lose this way. Okay, so let's see one more game. Our last game then will be Jeffrey Zhang versus Vladimir Dobrov, a Russian player who's I'm really completely unfamiliar with, but seems to be quite a strong player. And this is from the Challenger section, I should mention, which has had, of course, some very exciting games. And okay, the opening's kind of weird. The B6 Sicilian, and Jeffrey decides not to go into any sort of theoretical discussion, maybe because he's not normally a Sicilian player, or plays slowly against Sicilians, and so doesn't want to risk d4. So he just plays a just simple g3 system. He protects the e-pawn, and black double fianchetto. So we're in a very irregular opening here. I doubt if this has been played very much, especially on a higher level. And black decides to play sort of like an Ilyakin's fence, running around with or a Nimzovich Sicilian, running around with a knight. So what's going on here is white has space, but black has, two fianchetto bishops in active play. Now he just retreats rather than taking that pawn. And I'm not going to do any serious analysis of this game. I'm just going to show you because it has nice themes at the end. That's a very interesting move. As it turns out to be almost a winning idea. Not winning now, obviously, but in the end, this turns out to be the key to white winning the game. And it's very interesting because you think you just get some pieces out, bishop f4 or something, or knight a3, c2, knight d2, knight d2, e4, whatever, and he plays h4. He tries to soften up black's king side, and now he avoids the exchange of queens, white does, and white's lost some time here, and the knight looks pretty good on d5, so you think black would be perfectly well off here. I think he is actually okay, but this is kind of a cute move, this h5 idea. It's even possible that black should have stopped that. It looks really harmless. I mean, white has no pieces over there on the king side to attack with. I mean, one knight and just a little bit of a pawn here, but it turns out to put some real pressure on black's position. I think black had to break in the center really soon and just kind of break things up, because look what happens here. White's making more pawn moves. Notice that white hasn't developed any of these pieces, and the other pieces are on the first rank. So it's a very interesting game that way strategically. Jeffrey Zhang is a very talented young player that he knows that he can get away with this. This move e6 just turns out to be bad. It's not. I think it even deserves a question mark because it makes these big holes now. And I know that's obvious, and obviously black knows that. But black just figures he has plenty of time to protect those weaknesses, and it's a good solid move which consolidates his control of the light squares. But it turns out that white can actually get to these squares. Black underestimated how he thought he could just sort of play there and use his lead in development. But something went wrong. Right here, for example, this is probably the only real move that Jeffrey missed this game. He played this move, which is not bad. He's thinking of expanding on the queen side, and maybe he's thinking about playing this move sometime, but he's also got the ideas of attacking this way. But he could have played, interestingly enough, could have played this move, leaving the bishop only one square to go to, and then retreated the knight to play bishop here, and there's really nothing to do about that. There's no way to play that because, I mean, I don't know what, maybe you could try something like f6, but then you run into knight here with tempo on that square, and then this move is becoming a big move too. So this would have been a great way for white to play, but not at all obvious. And his intent all along has been to take here, so it's very strange to switch tactics all of a sudden. Okay, black plays that. That's a little bit desperate looking, but he's kind of tied down. And now, actually, white had a little tactic here that he could have tried. This is an interesting move to try. Just play that fork and then play here. And again, this is not at all obvious because black has various choices, but the main point is this move. And then the queen doesn't have a very good place to go to, because if it goes here, then white takes with tempo on g7. And then this move is extremely strong because it attacks here. And I don't know if I have to even go any further here, because this bishop, what happens now is that white wins his pawn back and has a check coming. And this is just a winning position, really, for white, because there's no way to stop some sort of check. So that was a big opportunity. Now, of course, it's more complicated than that, but that probably would have worked, that b5 move. But instead, what he plays is perfectly good. He plays that move. Now, if that dark square bishop goes after takes, that's going to be just winning for white. So black makes the right move, takes, but now that pawn's pinned. So white has a chance to pursue the move he wants to get in, which is knight d6, and now it turns out he has a really substantial advantage here. Okay, now b5. The idea is b5's coming. Now that pawn was attacked. Okay, so f6, I think, almost has to be a mistake. I think maybe this move isn't so bad. You know, maybe black's not in that terrible shape yet, but it's still not really attractive. It's certainly the right way to try, something like here and then probably just here, because it's a little hard to get to this pawn. The queen can't go to here or here because of knight c3 with a fork. So black's sort of hanging in here. You know, there's that nice outpost. I think white's better, but at least it's a game. So let's go back to the game. That move just ends up opening up things too much. What happens is, I think black was counting on f6, allowing the bishop to come out this way. It's a nice idea. It just, in practice, it doesn't work out because of this move. Bishop a3 is too strong. So white's going to win some material along that diagonal. And I think black might have even still thought he was probably okay here, because he's going to attack that knight and then bring his bishop out and have a lot of pressure, it looks like. But he is losing the exchange. And at this point, yeah, here, maybe he still thought he was doing sort of okay because he has two bishops and he has some pressure, but it just turns out there's no way to coordinate. And that move attacks the center again, and that move turns out to be actually a mistake. And there's a very pretty finish now for white. I don't know if you can see it. You might want to take a quick look or turn the tape off temporarily before you see it. But that move is very strong, because if the knight takes now, we have rook takes here. Or even knight takes, even better probably, right? Because it attacks, it gives this, it loosens this, but it also attacks that. And it turns out this is just an indefensible position. But the natural move is pawn takes, but that allows this very nice little move. Threatening, guess what? Checkmate. Black plays here to defend against it, and what else can black do? I don't know if there's anything. He could try to play something like this to defend that way, but then if nothing else, there's rook h6 ideas. I think first this move is strong, attacking the knight, and then the knight's sort of running out of places to go, and then maybe move the rook over. And it just, black's run out of defenders here. There's just too much going on here. So what he tries instead of that is just puts the bishop back to begin with, but not surprisingly, white has this very pretty second sacrifice here, threatening checkmate in one, and that means black has to create some sort of escape square, and then the fairly slow move, but completely decisive. The threat is knight f5, and there's simply nothing to do about it. He could have resigned right now. He tried one more move, tried to get out of this pin so he could move this bishop. And then that move was decisive because the queen can't stay in touch with the can't stay in touch with the bishop here. If queen takes e5, try to protect the bishop, there's a mate in 1. And if the queen goes anywhere else, if the queen goes here, then there's e6. And now the queen has to either lose track of the bishop or go for this position, which is, of course, completely awful. There was actually another win, too. Let me see if I can show you that. Oh, the other way to win this was simply to play check first. The king has to come back and now knight up. And that's kind of a funny position because this time you have this extra theme going on here with this move, too, and this move. So that's the other way he could have won. So anyway, a very nice little finishing attack and a very pretty win. And Jeffrey Zhang is back in contention here. After a bit of struggling a little bit earlier in the tournament, he's getting back in the thick of things. So thanks, everybody. Make sure you see the next round. We have tomorrow with Larry Christensen announcing. We have the games Aroni and Geary, Rapport Carlson, Van Wheelie Nepomniachtchi, Hari Krishna versus Yi, Adiban versus Andreakin, Elyanov versus Vocacek, and Karyakin versus So. So I hope you tune in for that, and I hope you enjoyed the round today.